Afternoon, I am Andrea Chisholm with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. The cash-strapped JUTC bus company exceeded its overtime budget by close to $729 million over a two-year period. Details were contained in a damning Auditor General's report on the Jamaica Urban Transit Company JUTC. The report was tabled in Parliament yesterday. Despite excess staff capacity, JUTC's management exceeded the overtime budget by $728.6 million for the 2017-2018 and 2018-2019 fiscal years. Drivers and mechanics attached to the Spanish Town and Ashenheim locations accounted for the top 15 highest overtime claims. The claims ranged from between 71 and 182% of some employees' annual salaries. In addition, for the April 2014 to July 2019 period, JUTC had an unapproved staff capacity which cost $1.15 billion. The Auditor General found no evidence that the unapproved staff created value by enhancing operational efficiency and improving service delivery. As at May 2020, there were 92 permanently employed JUTC staff members. Meanwhile, the JUTC also breached its human resources policy when it failed to advertise vacant positions. From a sample of 21 senior managers, there was no evidence that 9 of the positions were advertised. 8 senior officers were not interviewed for the job, and 6 did not meet the minimum qualification. One of the officers was even promoted within a year, even though they got an unsatisfactory performance appraisal. The Auditor General is therefore recommending that JUTC implement internal controls to ensure the company follows government guidelines. The Transport Ministry should also develop a competency profile for the JUTC board. Meanwhile, the Auditor General found net fuel shortages at the JUTC valued at $36.5 million. A review of fuel records showed significant variations in fuel inventory levels across all depot locations. There was a net accumulated shortage of over 231 litres. Shortages at the Portmore depot accounted for roughly 55%. JUTC said the variances were due to spillages, theft, and malfunctioning equipment. Charges are coming for a number of persons who have breached home quarantine orders linked to COVID-19. Prime Minister Andrew Holness gave the update in Parliament last night.
I'm concerned that a number of persons are not strictly observing the home quarantine orders, and I have asked the JCF to exercise greater vigilance and charge persons who are found to be in breach. I have been informed that 50 cases of breaches are now under investigation and nearing completion, and we can expect the first set of charges within the next couple of days. All the successes we have had thus far can be undone by just one super spreader, as has been the case in many other countries.
Over 20,000 persons should be in home quarantined under the Controlled Re-Entry Program. Mr. Holness is reminding persons to observe the 14-day quarantine rule.
So from the reports I've seen, our returning Jamaicans are not observing the quarantine. They are moving about. And we are seeing the pictures on Facebook and Instagram. So unless you can prove to us that those pictures were taken 2 or 3 years ago, they become very good evidence for prosecution.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister insists health officials are working to clear a backlog of COVID-19 tests by the end of the month. This follows renewed concerns about that and other issues from the parliamentary opposition. Scenes like these have become commonplace in front of business establishments. Customers forced to wait on the outside as there are restrictions on the number of people who can enter at any given time. It has not escaped the attention of MP Fitzjackson.
Two stands out: tax office in Crossroads and the police records office on Duke Street. It's like a marketplace. Up to today, I passed by the Crossroads tax office. I deliberately looked to see how many were wearing masks. Quite a number were, quite a number weren't. But the proximity was in total breach of physical distancing there and at the other.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says he has investigated the matter, reporting there's usually adequate physical distancing on the inside, but outside is posing a challenge.
They have pointed out that they have enlisted the help of the police, but the police can't be guards at these offices every day. So I have had discussions with the Minister of Finance. The question has been, how do they move most of their services online? And indeed, they are moving more services online, but it is a take-up. How many Jamaicans are actually moving online?
In the interim, though, Mr. Jackson put forward this suggestion.
Take, for example, in Crossroads, just off the top of my head, across the road, which is a parking lot, could possibly be looked at as a holding area and some numbering system, so that, people can be processed in a manageable way.
Meanwhile, opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Maurice Guy, continues to raise issues about COVID-19 testing. Up to Tuesday, July 28, 37,210 samples were tested. Dr. Guy has been informed of a backlog of roughly 10,000 samples.
We have a capacity of over 3,000 tests per day that between National Public Health Laboratory and the University Viral Laboratory can test. In fact, that amount has been beefed up by the two machines that have been recently donated. But we have not tested, except for one day, any number more than 1,000.
There is a shortage of the testing material. I forget the technical name, but the kits. There is a global shortage. And we were and still are running low on the supplies.
Mr. Holness insists health authorities are working to clear the backlog by the end of July. And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We have much more stories when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. A former police constable was fatally shot during an attack in Innswood Village, Spanish Town, St. Catherine this morning. He has been identified as 59-year-old Newton Bentley. The incident took place around 7 o'clock. Mr. Bentley was working as a security guard at the Innswood Village sewage treatment plant, where he was attacked by gunmen. Lawyers asking the court to free 5 detainees under the state of emergency this morning made submissions about the constitutionality of the detentions. Dion Jackson Miller reports.
John Clark, representing the detainees, attacked the constitutionality of the detentions. He argued that it's always been the case that a single judge can pronounce on constitutional issues on a habeas corpus application. He argued that the rights of the detainees cannot be suspended arbitrarily by the executive, meaning in this case the Minister of National Security. He argued there must be due process of law and that the separation of powers doctrine is being violated. He said care must be taken not to allow the power of the judiciary to be whittled away by allowing indefinite detentions by the executive. Now, Louis-Jean Hacker, for the Attorney General's chambers, argued that only a full court of 3 judges can make a decision about the constitutionality of a state of emergency in this application. At this point, the judge said, "You are rehashing what I already decided. I accepted the claimant's position." So some validation there for the detainees' attorneys, given the confusion over exactly what happened at the first hearing of this matter last week. Mr. Hacker maintained that detainees are being held under a state of emergency lawfully proclaimed by the Governor General and continued by Parliament decided by a two-thirds majority. He argued that habeas corpus can only succeed and the men be released if the detention order was not validly made, which he said is not the situation here. He said they've all appeared before an emergency powers review tribunal which ruled the detention orders were valid. The judge has indicated that a decision may not come before the end of the term on Friday. Beyond Jackson-Miller, TVJ News.
Homeowners in porous Manchester are asking for a better deal for their properties ahead of the construction of the South Coast Highway. We have details in this report.
Homeowners of Redberry District in porous Manchester are dissatisfied with the government's plans to relocate them, as road works are set to begin on the South Coast Highway project. The property owners complain that the offer made by the government is not enough.
I have a house, is big, family house. Was about 6 bedroom, live 2 bathroom and everything, you know, and them tell me say only 15 million them can pay me for the house. That can buy back my house and buy land and pay, do everything for my house. So what the government do about that?
But my issue, the road works, everybody wants progress. We know we have to have roads, but it shouldn't be at the cost of the persons who can least afford it. So my mother lives here, she's retired, and I'm living here with her. They've bought peace at the back. It's a very small piece. I'm not going to argue about that. But the point is, we're told that we're not going to get anything for the trees that we've planted, and we paid to put them in. We're not going to get paid anything for dust nor noise nuisance.
The owners say a proper valuation of their properties was not done before the offer was made. They are demanding additional consultation with representatives from the National Road Operating and Constructing Company, NROC.
The value that they put on their 5-bedroom house, which was 2.9, you can't buy a 5-bedroom house for that. So if they didn't have a valuation done independently, the land commissioners wouldn't have upped the price slightly. So it's a question of, is it fair to ask people to fund the road who can least afford it? That is the point. Okay. And no meeting. Apparently the bulldozers are in already, and the meeting is scheduled for Thursday. Okay. So basically, it just seems that we've been dealt with kind of shoddy.
The residents are appealing to the government to provide a better offer at a meeting to be held in the community on Thursday. Prince Moore, TVJ News.
Meantime, residents of porous Manchester say a section of land which is being cleared by a bulldozer has led to additional problems.
This is where the road, the highway 2020 gone up, is cutting right now, and we have some tomb there on the left, and they didn't come and talk to us about it. They just bulldoze it down, and the dust is going to affect us who is in Redberry right now. So there's nobody else we can get to talk to more than get the media here.
We can't go to the place, they don't notify nobody, dust them and so forth, and people are asthma, and they don't notify nobody. They'll come with bulldozer and I push down place and I kick up dust. They don't care about nobody else. Right? If they don't care about somebody else, we can't give them passage we got you. Okay. But they take with her.
Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, Leslie Campbell, says Jamaica should tap into the high seas to boost the sector. The high seas is a large area of the sea that is not within any country's jurisdiction. With the economy severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Campbell believes the high seas would offer tremendous opportunities.
Jamaica cannot afford to treat this opportunity with scant regard. Leveraging our blue economy is of paramount importance. We have been working assiduously to put the necessary legislative and institutional framework in place in order to tap into this potential million-dollar industry. Ladies and gentlemen, since April of this year, there has been a decline in the fishery sector as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, with fish production moving from 1,098.39 metric tons in March to 730.39 metric tons in April.
Mr. Campbell was speaking at the recent launch of the project to promote community-based climate resilience in the fisheries sector. The project aims to enhance resilience to climate change in fishing and agricultural communities. It is expected to be executed over a 5-year period at a cost of $4.9 million.
It will certainly strengthen the fisheries policy and regulatory framework for climate-resilient fisheries and aquaculture management, as well as build capacity to promote sustainable fisheries management. We must establish effective measures to protect our marine and coastal ecosystems and build resilience to climate change in the sector as an important input in sustaining the country's economic growth and rural livelihoods.
And it's time now for a preview of what's coming up in this evening's health report.
In the next edition of the health report, we will look at dangers of floodwaters and diseases.
If you have had an outbreak of typhoid fever, that's another very, very serious risk, which in certain areas, like I think in Westmoreland, you have infrequent outbreaks of typhoid fever, and you'll have to be very, very careful there. So the good sense is that if you're not sure about the stability of your house during a hurricane, is to move into shelter, taking essential clothes, and of course, wrapping your important documents.
That's the health report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's healthy living tip. Wash your hands thoroughly after contact with floodwater or items contaminated by floodwater. Wear protective clothing such as boots and gloves when you know you will be in contact with floodwater or handling contaminated items. And cover cuts and abrasions and ensure they don't come in contact with floodwater or contaminated items.
And in sports, President of the Jamaica Table Tennis Association, Godfrey Lothian, says he has no issues with going to the Dispute Resolution Foundation in order to bring an end to the standoff between himself and presidential challenger Andrew Liu. On Tuesday, the Jamaica Olympic Association decided against mediation and referred both parties to the DRF. It's a decision that has left Liu disappointed, but Lothian says he has no issue with the recommendation.
Where we are now, with the lot of mistrust, I think it warrants independent mediator. Because you need to deal with the voters list, the membership list, because that is a contention for both parties. And therefore, the Jamaica Olympic Association advising both parties that they think that the issue, which are sharp issues, should go to the Dispute Resolution Foundation, the DRF, for mediation. I think is the right thing to do.
The JOA had promised to mediate the matter between Liu and Lothian after a court ruling in September 2019 declared that the last annual general meeting and special general meeting were null and void. Liu, who is hoping to unseat Lothian, is adamant that the 3-term president should not hold the position based on the court ruling. And that's the Midday News. I'm Andrea Chisholm. Do remember to join us at 7 for the Primetime News package. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.